What's up, guys? We are going to be covering a lot today. We're covering the backstory with Amajiki's name as a hero, as well as him fighting 3 of the Hisaikai all by himself and how he overcame that, as well as Fat Gum's ability and Kirishima's past and how he overcame it. Yes, we're covering 2 episodes today, so we're all caught up for next week, so let's get right into it. So we obviously knew this for a while now, and we're getting more information about it, that clearly Amajiki looks up to Mirio, and we see that, of course, right at the beginning as they're running in, but we get more about it with this cut back to when they were kids, and Amajiki was not very comfortable at the school that he was in, and everybody already knew who everybody else was, so nobody was talking to him except for Mirio. And Mirio came right up, and of course Amajiki says he was like the sun in terms of his brightness, and that plays a big factor later. But of course before that we have the main raid still happening on the Hisaikai's headquarters, and this is where we see the benefits, more than one of course, but we see one of the benefits of foresight with Sir Night-Eye, which is the fact that as they are making their way into the building, he stops at a spot that most of them would have just run past, because he knows what pattern to press, because he saw from the previous Hisaikai member that he used foresight on what the code was and what he needed to do to actually get into their underground portion of the headquarters. Now there are people waiting for them, but the 2 sidekicks that Sir Night-Eye have take care of them fairly quickly. We see a bit of Bubble Girl's ability as well as the centipede guy whose name I forget. But they buy the rest of the group enough time to get down into the underground headquarters. And this is where we actually see something that I was wondering, and they actually explain it, and it's pretty cool, which is Mirio's costume, because obviously when we saw the last episode of him fighting, not last episode, but the last episode that we saw him fighting in, his clothes just fall right off. So it's kind of not really normal for him to be able to wear clothes when his abilities are activated, but his costume is actually made of a fiber made from his hair, which means that when his quirk activates, his suit stays on him and activates as well. So that's actually really cool and really well thought out. I love how each little ability in this series has something well thought out about it. It's really cool. Except it seems as though his helmet doesn't have that ability, because I guess harder materials like that don't really work. So that explains why at the opening you see him take his helmet off before activating his quirk, because I guess that just doesn't work with him as well. And he uses this ability to put his head through the wall and see what's going on the other side, which is nothing. So Kirishima and Deku use their quirks and bust through the wall, which is cool because now Rocklock is like, oh, well, that actually didn't suck. You know, he actually sort of appreciated what these kids pulled off. So a little bit of appreciation starting to come about with these 2 heroes. So we'll see if Rocklock completely changes his mind later, but as of right now, he's just kind of, it doesn't suck. He's kind of an irritating character to me. I don't know why. He just irritates me a bit. Anyway, once they get to the other side of this wall, we see Mimic use his ability, but he uses it with that power-enhancing drug that we saw earlier in the season, and his ability is really weird. But Mimic's ability is interesting because it is actually him going and becoming a part of like an object, or in this case, a building, and being able to control it as if he would control his own body. So he begins to warp the floor and the walls and everything. So he's just like majorly throwing off the path that these heroes are trying to go down, because that power enhancing drug is giving him the ability to do that. And we learn this in the next episode, but I was kind of guessing this for this episode, which is that there is like a shadowy version of himself sort of present against the wall whenever he uses his ability. So my guess, and what they ended up saying is probably the case in the next episode, is that if they can attack and damage or just somehow lay into the physical form of him in the wall, then it's possible to actually take him out. But as of right now, they just have to deal with the fact that they're kind of his playthings in this giant building. But as the walls are kind of warping and everything around, Mirio does what I was kind of expecting Mirio to do, which is to run ahead and go try to figure out if there's a safer route. He runs right through the wall and he's gone. He leaves the rest of the group to kind of fend for themselves, which I mean isn't the most unreasonable thing. They are heroes after all, but still, man, you're just gonna ditch them like that? Then the floor opens up and they fall into their own little hole, and there are 3 more of the bullets of the Hisaikai And this is where we get into the heroes sort of anticipating and planning, but mainly Amajiki stepping forward to take the brunt of this, and he does a damn good job. So these three Hisaikai members are able to steal things, they are able to eat things no matter what, and they are able to crystallize. Those are the three abilities of each of them, and so that means that with these Hisaikai members, if the police draw their guns, the one can steal them. They are extremely, extremely dangerous, and thankfully Eraserhead actually disables their quirks for the moment, so they are able to sort of get, the heroes are able to get a bit of a leg up, but it's, oh man, so the way that Overhaul has been planning the bullets of the Hisaikai, they each kind of complement one another, and in this instance you essentially have two main attackers with one person who can disarm anybody who comes their way, so it's actually pretty intense. Granted, even with that, one of them is able to pull a gun, but Amajiki actually takes them out, well, takes the weapons away and breaks them, and so that's something, but once Eraserhead's quirk wears off, then the fight really starts. But it is cool though, because we know that the biggest shortcoming or the biggest weakness on Amajiki's part, on Sun Eater's part, is the fact that he has no self-confidence. But in this instance, we have Fat Gum realizing that he said he can do this. So that means that he is confident enough to take on these villains rather, and so they are fairly confident in leaving him to his own devices. But like I said earlier, once Eraserhead's quirk wears off, that's when the real fight begins, and we have one of the Hisaikai members with a knife hidden in his mask, which he uses to cut the tentacles. The other guy just kind of bulks his way out with the crystals, but we also discover that the one can actually steal things which I guess kind of count as items, which would be the clam shells that you can see Amajiki making on his hands. He pulls those right off of Amajiki's hands. So yeah, that's going to be a big disadvantage. However, it's once Amajiki takes a hit that we see this flashback begin, and we see this flashback to high school, which means that Mirio and Amajiki have actually known each other for quite a while. And so with this, we see that his abilities aren't the greatest at that time. Like, he's still learning, but he's learning very slowly. He can make a leaf sprout out of his hands, and that's about it. But Mirio is way worse off because he keeps like deactivating and activating his quirk at the wrong time. So he like smacks face first into a board. It's kind of funny to see, actually. But Mirio is so confident in the fact that he can get it right at some point. So because he's so confident in it, he just keeps trying and he'll eventually get it. And of course he masters it down the road. But yeah, at this point, he's still very like green. He's not very good at using his abilities, and neither is Amajiki, but they kind of encourage each other in a way. Mirio uses Amajiki as encouragement to continue to move forward and try to master his ability, and he points out that even though Sun Eater has all these things that are kind of making him feel as though he can't do it, he's still trying. And that encourages Mirio, and Mirio, being encouraged by Amajiki, then in turn encourages Amajiki. It's actually kind of cool to see how that worked. And in the interaction of them walking home from school, this is where we learn how Amajiki got his name Sun Eater, which is the fact that he saw Mirio as this brightness, this bright as the sun sort of thing. And because he didn't feel as though he was that bright, he was just like, you're the sun, you shine. And Mirio, he pretty much thinks that Amajiki outshines him in every way. So he said, we need to find something that is better than the sun if you're going to call me the sun. So he called him Sun Eater. And that's where his name came from, Sun Eater. That's actually really cool because it's kind of ironic because the Sun Eater would make things dark, and he definitely is a very dark kind of like, mentally he feels kind of dark, which is kind of funny. So it's fitting in both ways. And we actually see where Mirio gets that stupid little like thumb trick thing from, which was that Amajiki showed him as a kid. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, this flashback in true fairy tale style gives Amajiki the power up he needs to start trying harder. And so he starts mixing his abilities and trying to make toughened scale things over top of his octopus tentacles and masking himself with clams and all that stuff. So he just goes all out with the way he can actually leverage his abilities. And with this, he unleashes his, I think is his ultimate move, which is Chimera Kraken, which is actually kind of cool, and it's very intense looking. He's got tentacles everywhere, he's hardened, it's really cool. But I like the fact that it's called the Chimera because the voice actor in the English dub for Amajiki is the same voice actor who, as a kid, voiced Alphonse in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. So I just found that kind of funny. But as this is happening, we have one of the members who was knocked out previously by Eraserhead wake up and start eating all the tentacles and everything. So his ability is essentially that he can eat anything. He never gets full. He like burns off whatever he eats immediately, which we see is why Eraserhead knocked him out in the first place, because he would have been the biggest threat. And with this setback, they actually pretty much take and put Sun Eater in a position where he isn't really able to hold his own very well, because their teamwork, their brotherhood of being nothing and then being found by Overhaul and becoming this group, this team, this family, Sun Eater can understand the family and friendship portion of it and the fact that teamwork is important. And of course, he doesn't agree with their methods or their reasonings, but he can understand where they're coming from. And this is why they work so well together. But this is where Sun Eater ends up being more clever than these three, because at the point where he is about to get just punched in the face by this crystallized dude, he eats some of the crystals and is able to actually use that to harden himself. And it was very, very impressive how quick thinking he was, how he was able to do that. And on top of that, he used the teamwork of these three at their disadvantage by sending one of them, sending all three of them, and essentially getting each of them in the other's way so that they can't attack him and blowing them up against a wall. And with that, the fight's over. And it's cool because Sun Eater has an appreciation for their teamwork, like I said earlier, and the family mentality, considering that they were found by Overhaul and brought up from nothing, but it doesn't really justify their means, if you know what I mean. But that's the episode. Like, that is it. He managed to defeat all of them. The latter portion of that episode was exclusively them being dealt with by Amajiki, and so we are now just into the next episode, which is actually going to happen in this video. So let's go right into the next episode. And this episode literally does just pick up where the previous one left off, like most of them do, but in this instance we have Amajiki trying to leave to catch up with the others, and he exerted way more energy than he thought. And I mean, you can kind of tell that he exerted a lot of energy, so I don't know why he's surprised. I wasn't surprised. I expected him to be done after that, and he was. He passed out, and that was it. And in this episode, of course, once we sort of see the final portion of the fight with Amajiki and the three that he was facing last episode, we catch up with the main group, and they're trying to get into, or trying to get to, rather, the main sanctuary, the main area where Aerie's being kept. I wouldn't call it a sanctuary because it's not very safe. So they're trying to find her, and this is where we sort of get an idea of what Mimic's abilities are, in the fact that he has a portion of his physical self in the area that he's controlling. So he is mainly focused right now on the police, so the heroes don't have to deal as much with his abilities, but that does kind of come around, and we see that he actually launches an attack to try to take out Eraserhead, and he fails to take out Eraserhead and instead ends up getting Fat Gum, and by extension, we also have Kirishima stuck with him. But I am getting ahead of myself because we do get something very interesting and kind of important, which is the fact that we learn more about the Hisaikai and how it's changed since Overhaul has taken over. So previously, it was a very traditional Yakuza-style setup. It was very underground, very traditional, and that was due to Overhaul's father being very traditional, I guess is the best way to put it. And with Overhaul's father being the way that he is, it seems as though none of this would have actually been the way that they would have operated if his dad was still in charge. But with his dad being taken out of it, we have Overhaul taking over, and he is working with villains. He took on a villain name. He's taking on people who are just straight up villains into the group. So now it's less of an honor thing and more of the fact that if they don't agree or obey what Overhaul says, he's just going to straight up kill them, which kind of makes me think that perhaps the state that Overhaul's dad is in is possibly caused by Overhaul. It's just my thought. But anyway, getting back to what happened previously, we have Fat Gum pushing Eraserhead out of the way and getting pushed into a hole, and only once he lands there and realizes Kirishima's under him do we see that Kirishima also jumped in the way to try to save Eraserhead, and now they're both stuck. facing off against 2 more of the bullets of the Hisaikai, again set up to complement one another very well. We have a sword and a shield. We have a very powerful puncher, and we have somebody who can create essentially an almost impenetrable shield. And we discover how strong these punches are because Kirishima jumps in the way and hardens himself extremely well and still cracks. He still has his hardening cracked by this guy. And the guy's very fight oriented. He's just like, I'm the strongest, come and fight me. He reminds me of the dude with the boar's head from Demon Slayer. So that's something. But he just lays into Fat Gum. And we actually learn about what Fat Gum's ability is more so. We know he absorbs energy. We know that he can absorb energy, but we learn actually how he can use that and redistribute it. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it works really well in their favor. So with the introduction of these 2 characters and seeing that Fat Gum is getting pummeled and seeing that Kirishima is pushed way back, he's now in a totally different portion of the room, we now have, of course, them dealing with the power of these 2 together, the fact that Fat Gum's actually getting walloped, and the fact that Kirishima's spirit is basically broken. And this is also where we learn finally what that instance was in the past that we had been kind of hinted to previously in the last 2 episodes? I think it was 2 episodes ago that happened. So to reiterate, Fat Gum's getting obliterated. He's just getting the crap beat out of him by this guy, and Kirishima's not doing much. And again, this is a flashback-oriented episode similar to what we had with Amajiki's episode last time. So yeah, he is just kind of watching as Fat Gum's getting the snot beat out of him, and we get a flashback to what sort of made him want to fight the way he does and become the kind of hero he is. And of course it encourages him in the end, but we'll get to that in a minute. So of course he is essentially counted out of the fight by the villains immediately because it looks as though his spirit is already broken, so he's not going to have the willingness to fight. But once we get into the flashback, we see that from the start, Kirishima was very much a honor and sort of power and honor sort of fighter, and he couldn't really harden himself that much because we had a couple kids bullying somebody, and he goes up to fight them, and they just throw a rock at his face, and his hardening was not enough to actually help with that. Also, he had black hair, so we see where the makeover came from. We get to actually see that in a bit. But with his attempts to stop the bullying failing like they did, we then have Mina Ashida come up after they just kind of walk away. Mina comes up and she stops the fighting, she stops the bullying, and she actually kind of makes friends with them. So she definitely seems to be a bit more hero material, at least from what we're presented with in this moment. But after that, we then get more iteration about how Kirishima is all about honor and making himself stronger and blah, 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 all that stuff, which makes no difference in the long run to him because he believes in honor, but he doesn't really know how to properly act on it. And then we see a moment where a hero's strength, or rather an upcoming hero's strength, is tested, which is that the 2 girls from his school were being threatened by a villain who wanted to know where the headquarters was of another hero. And they're panicking. He panics and doesn't move, but Mina jumps right in the way and actually tricks him by directing him to the police, and then collapses in fear. And that really, really affected Kirishima because he didn't act like a hero, and as a result kind of gives up, or rather crosses out the first choice of his next school being UA. But then there's something that plays into him kind of revitalizing his want to become a hero. So we actually see that a story in the news was one of the things that was sort of making him feel worse in a way, because he didn't run in and take action like he should have. And in the news, there was a kid who was attacked by a villain, and the kid's friend ran in to help him without even thinking. Well, guess where that came from? That was season 1 with Deku running in to save freaking Bakugo from a hero. That was actually pretty cool, so it's neat how even unintentionally Deku is still kind of encouraging people, or sort of setting an example even though he didn't have powers at that point. We also learn what the scar is over his eye, which is that when his quirk manifested, he cut himself over the eye and he kind of hated his quirk, but then he learned about Red Riot and sort of became encouraged by him And then we see even more encouragement coming from Red Riot after Kirishima kind of throws a fit and throws a bunch of stuff off of his bookshelf. One of those little hologram discs things falls to the ground and starts playing a clip of Red Riot in an interview. And this encourages him in a way because he now knows that Red Riot went through the same thing of seeing somebody die because of his inaction. And Kirishima came very close to that with the girls from his school. And with that encouragement, we end up having him continue on with his want to become a hero at UA. He apologizes for not doing anything to the girls who were actually in danger. Like, he apologizes for not doing anything to help them. They didn't even know who he was, but Mina kind of recognized him. We see him in the exam to get into UA, we see him get accepted into UA, and then we see his interaction with Mina where she knew what he looked like beforehand, and she said that she'd be nice for now because she knew that what happened that day affected him. But someday she was going to talk about the fact that he went through a total makeover of changing his red hair or his black hair to red and spiking it up and all that, so that was kind of cool. So again, an entire flashback for this episode about what Kirishima was doing and about how what he did in the past affected him. And now, as we have Fat Gum getting just obliterated, but as we learn, absorbing that energy so that he can make an attack, we now have Kirishima hopping right in with still fear, but a new level of kind of strength and energy to keep hardening himself as he takes these hits, which somewhat surprises the guy who is fighting them. And the shield guy wants to throw up a shield and does, and this is where Fat Gum's ability comes in. So Fat Gum actually is fat because it's his ability to, I guess, build up fat and absorb that energy, but as he absorbs that energy, he then burns that fat as he absorbs the energy, which then allows him to attack with a massive amount of force, enough in this instance to shatter the shield of the guy who was defending the two Hisakai members. And with that, he just kind of straight up one-punch mans them into a wall, and now he's skinny. So, I mean, I wish I could lose weight that way. And that's that episode. We learn a whole lot about Kirishima and what makes him want to become a hero and why he wants to become a hero in that way. And we also get a pretty interesting sort of dynamic with the way that he and Fat Gum worked in this fight, because Fat Gum is a shield and so is Kirishima, but they can both, especially Fat Gum, can be quite the actual sword. And I like that dynamic with the sword and shield fighting one another with the two Hisakai members, and then of course Kirishima. So it was actually really cool to see. I definitely am really waiting to see what happens with Mirio. I mean, we haven't seen him now this entire episode because we knew that he ran ahead, and I'm really worried because we know he ran ahead, which means he has the chance of running into Overhaul solo, which could be very bad. And we also then have the potential of like those bullets, and we also have the potential of Deku and the rest of them. Like, oh boy. They are losing members of their main hero group, at least in chunks of 2 per episode. I mean, we lost a bunch of them at the start. We lost now Amajiki, who can't really do anything anymore. We lost the main ones up at the door because they're busy taking on the rest of the group. And we have now Kirishima, and we have freaking Fat Gum out of it. So who is next? I want to know. I'm very worried about what's going to happen next and who's going to go. So I guess we'll find out. Either way, guys, thanks for sitting through this oddly long series of episode reviews, because I did want to get through 2 of them today so that I'm caught up as they come out next week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please make sure to like and subscribe. It does mean a lot to me when you guys do that. I want to keep doing these videos, and I'm loving having this new space to do it in. Hopefully you guys are liking it too. It's actually a lot easier now because I can sit back and do this. I need to get a better microphone, I will fully admit, but other than that, hope you guys are enjoying it, and otherwise I'll see you all in the next episode. Make sure to be there, and have a good one. Hey guys, just hopping in at the end here. Thanks for watching through the whole video. I hope you enjoyed it. I do still have merch. I've actually had it for quite a while, but not a lot of people know about it or care. And so if you guys want to support me or check it out just because it looks cool, go to the link in the description. You can see some of the designs I have, like the Steel Frodo in Steins Gate design, or even the Mob Psycho 100 design, and maybe even buy one if you like it, or don't. I cried myself to sleep at night anyway. So either way, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one.